Thank you and welcome. I'm here to talk about walking, simple walking. And it could just be one of the most health-conscious decisions you make if done on a regular basis at any stage in your life. In fact, I think in 1994, a clinical epidemiologist by the name, Jesse, I've forgotten, Morris, I think his last name, said walking or exercise is the best buy in public health. That's 30 years ago. So let's go back to an older physician, Hippocrates. I took the Hippocratic Oath in 1975 when I graduated. Walking is the best medicine. I didn't practice then, 2,000 years ago, but I don't think they had a lot to offer as far as modern medicine is concerned, and that statement was probably true. Paul Dudley White, you've probably never heard of him. He was a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and wrote one of the first textbooks on cardiology, the study of the heart. This is a quote from him around 1930 or 31, I believe. A vigorous 5-mile walk will do more good for an unhappy but otherwise healthy adult than all the medicine and psychology in the world. Now, could that be true? I don't know. Let's walk you through the evidence for that statement, okay? And I don't think there's any doubt there's been a resurgence of interest in walking in the last couple of decades. Here's an excellent book if anybody's interested in walking. It's a good read. It's a nonfiction science read, but it's easily readable. Shane O'Mara is a neuroscientist, one who studies the brain from Dublin, Ireland. And he reviews the science of walking and a lot of the evidence behind its benefits for health. I mean, most of us are vaguely aware of cardiac rehabilitation because, heart disease is pretty prevalent in our society, and it's a long journey since I was a med student in the early 1970s, and people with a heart attack were put to bed for 2 weeks with a very gradual reintroduction to life as they formerly knew it. Well, now, if you have an event, intervention is offered quickly, and you're recommended to enroll in a cardiac rehabilitation program, which comprises education about your heart, but also usually some form of aerobic exercise, walking, cycling, or light running or jogging. And that has been shown to reduce your risk of recurrent heart attack or needing bypass surgery or death within a period of time that the study is involved by about 30 to 40%. So it turns out that walking is good for your heart. Shane O'Mara also says it's good for your brain. When we walk, our brain moves with us. Blood supply is increased to the brain, and in particular the hippocampus, which is concerned with memory and thought processes. And so you can show that exercise, especially if you're walking in nature by water or green space, rolling countryside, or parkland, it's beneficial for the brain. It will literally improve your memory, your thinking, and it can improve your mood. It can relieve stress and anxiety. So walking, it turns out, is also good for your brain. Walking has also hit modern literature and the cinema. A really good read, if you're interested, is The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. It's a fictional novel about a man who goes out to post a letter, recently retired, and rather spontaneously decides to walk the length of Britain from Exeter and Devon in the southwest to Berwick-on-Tweed, just below the Scotland border in the northeast. Really entertaining read, and a lot about love and life. And He decides to do this journey to visit an old friend or acquaintance that he learns is dying and wanted to just show up before the person died. Now, this is a movie starring Martin Sheen, 2010, about hiking the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And again, a lot of people now are doing sections of that, or sometimes the whole walk. Catch this, for holidays and for fun, not just for exercise. And then we've got the book Wild by Cheryl Strayed, written in 2012, I think. And then this movie was nominated for an Academy Award starring Reese Witherspoon. And this is a nonfiction book. This woman was struggling with heroin addiction. She'd had a divorce. She was only 26 years old at the time, I think. And she was also grieving the loss of her mother. And she decided to hike this rigorous Pacific Crest Trail in California and Oregon, and basically got her life back together again walking. And a more humorous approach to walking, based on the book by Bill Bryson, A Walk in the Woods. This movie, 2015, starred Robert Redford and Nick Nolte, quite a humorous walk along one of the longest trails in the United States, along the Appalachian Trail, from the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee up into the New England states. I can't say that I've walked the entire length, but I have done sections of that. Interestingly, Bill Bryson has another great book, if you enjoy reading, Notes on a Small Island, which is basically a walking tour of England. And I think it's 1995 or something, like 30 years ago. Again, an excellent read. So let's step back a bit. Stand-up comedian, didn't know it. Why walk? Well, walking comes naturally. Most of us have figured out how to do it by the time we're about a year and a half, unless we're disabled. Doesn't require any fancy equipment except a good pair of walking shoes, I guess. No expensive equipment is required. Can be done anytime, anywhere. It's not intimidating sometimes, like going to the gym if you're not in super shape or silhouettically challenged. It can be purpose-related, walking your dog in the neighborhood. You can walk to work, which is very healthy for not only you, but the environment. You can walk for simple errands like posting a letter, filling a prescription, buying a few groceries. It's a simple form of exercise as we age. And it's hard to take walking seriously as a form of exercise, but it is. Take my word for it, and I'll show you. There's numerous health benefits, which I'm coming to. And if you're concerned about climate change, as I am, it's a form of active transportation. There's no carbon footprint. It's not as efficient a form of manual transportation as cycling, but I would argue that it's more enjoyable and it opens you up to your senses of smell and sight and sounds. Case in point, my wife and I were walking in Prince Edward Island last year, and twice we saw bald eagles perched on a treetop along our hiking routes. And I don't think I would have seen that on a mountain bike or if I was in a car or a train or a bus or a plane. I think it's enjoyable in leisure time, and I'm going to show you some slides later on how my wife and I have incorporated walking into our lifestyle, and I like to think it's been beneficial for my health. My father died at 49 of a heart attack, and so far I've outlived him. Well, do the math, somebody. 72 subtract 49. And until I read this book in praise of walking, I hadn't really thought about why people walk or the different types of walking. Well, there's the general, everyday, casual walking that we do to go from the kitchen to the bedroom or the bathroom, or if you're at work, walking from one room to another or going to the photocopier or what have you. Walking can be purpose-related. I made it a point during most of my career to walk to work unless I was on call and needed an emergency where I could drive faster to an emergency than I could walk. Walking has social aspects to it. I was talking to Wendy and Elaine earlier about a charitable walk they did for breast cancer in Ottawa. So there were charitable walks, Terry Fox runs, the Walk for Hospice, Walk for ALS. And this is where it's groups of people walk, and it's socially acceptable and socially engaging. We have parades and marching and that as well. You can walk purely for fitness if you so choose. If the weather's really miserable, my wife and I will walk laps at the Summit Center, or I'll use the treadmill in my basement. And then there's the adventure, what's more, hiking. And that's valuable because you're changing the terrain around you. You're not just walking on flat pavement. You're having to go up and down, step over tree roots and around stalks, sometimes across streams on rocks. And this is where the poles really do come in handy for your balance. I should point out, if anybody has any questions as we're going along, I don't mind answering them en route, or you can save them up for the end. It makes no difference to me. Now, I'm a committed walker. I like walking. But that's not to say that other forms of moderate activity aren't equally beneficial for one's health. The problem is you do need to do it on a somewhat regular basis. But even for pickleball, currently very popular, you can do it outdoors in spring, summer, and fall, but the group in town that plays pickleball, they organize how to play it indoors in the winter as well. Cycling, it's usually a 3-season sport, but not always. People have thick, fat tires and snow tires on bicycles and use it year-round. I don't, but some do. Running and jogging, swimming, golf, skating, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, those are all examples of moderate activities. Running would probably be considered a more vigorous activity. And unfortunately, as we age, there are a number of effects to our body, as I'm sure you all know. There's a general decline in our physical abilities and our endurance and strength. I used to think my 50-pound Kevlar canoe was light when I was 27. Now, to me, it's pretty heavy, and I bought a 22-pound canoe, which I can manage. Sarcopenia is the medical term for a decrease in muscle mass. And so you lose muscle strength and endurance. And also, we're not as flexible as we get older than when we're young. I mean, playing with my 3.5-year-old grandson, who clearly is closer to the floor than I am, I can get down on the floor, but getting up is a lot harder than 35 years ago when I had my own son to play with. And again, another point is our cognition tends to decline with age. Not that everybody is going to get dementia or Alzheimer's disease, but our short-term memory does tend to fade as we get older, and yet our confidence in our own abilities increases. There are numerous health benefits to walking. And you can probably read these as well as I can. I mean, I've already alluded to increased cardiovascular fitness. And there's a reduced risk of, even if you've not had a heart attack or whatever to begin with. Clearly, when it says reduce the risk of death, that's not exactly true. We're all going to die. But within the study period of the experiments, as you were, it will reduce the risk of dying within that period of 3 years to 7 years that the study is conducted for. But walking and being active will reduce the risk of cardiovascular, that's heart attacks, strokes, heart failure, by 26%. When you exercise, your systolic, the top figure of your blood pressure, does go up. That's normal. When you're in between periods of exercise, though, both your diastolic and your systolic pressure decreases. Weight-bearing exercise, walking, is good for your bones. And, it's not surefire that you're going to not develop osteoporosis as you get older, but it will help to delay that and improve your bone strength. It improves your balance and coordination so that you're less likely to have falls when you're older. People that walk briskly and runners, even on ice, they're less likely to fall because they're used to moving and adjusting to the terrain. If you baby yourself and not go out when it's inclement weather, and then you do go out, you might stumble on a sidewalk a lot more easily and fall. Believe it or not, it improves osteoarthritis. It helps to lubricate your joints. Now, if your arthritis is far advanced, then you're in significant pain at night and you can barely move, that's where other forms of modern medicine come in handy, like knee replacements and hip replacements have revolutionized the care of older folks with arthritis of those joints. Really releases them again to be mobile. And it does reduce certain cancer risks and mortality from cancer within the study period. There's more. It helps to maintain a healthy body weight and lose if overweight. Everybody's looking for a quick fix. Ozempic, semaglutide, a medicine for diabetes. People can't get it now. It's in short supply because everybody wants to take it because it's one of the first medications for diabetes that helps you lose weight. So people that are overweight are looking for this drug because it's a quick and easy way to lose several kilograms. Helps control blood sugars in diabetics, especially if you walk after a meal. I've had patients that lose 20 pounds that can come off insulin or stop some of their medications for diabetes. Truly is. Walking increases the blood flow to your muscles and sugar gets taken up by your muscles and isn't deposited in your liver or fat. Improves your energy, and you certainly have a good night's sleep if you walk 42 miles or kilometers in a day, as Wendy said she did on that charitable hike for breast cancer. Clears one mind. I mean, poets and authors have said this all along, that, walking, helps you make decisions that you're finding tough, clears your thinking process. And Dr. O'Mara would argue that it reduces stress and anxiety and will improve mood. And there are short studies that show that walking can be as effective as treating depression as medications that are sometimes prescribed. And again, reduces all-cause mortality. Well, that's in the confines of the study done. Doesn't prevent death completely. These are the recommended minimal guidelines that have, they're out there for the general public who don't have any diseases or illnesses. They're recommended for people with heart disease. They're recommended for people with diabetes, and they're recommended for people that are overweight or obese. 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise, such as walking, that works out to about 21, 22 minutes a day. If you're going to do a more vigorous exercise and expend more energy doing so, you don't need to spend quite as much time doing it. So if you're a runner, 75 minutes a week is probably sufficient. Now, these are minimal guidelines. If you're trying to lose weight, I would probably double that. But I also have a statement: you can't run away from your fork. So you also have to have healthy eating habits. Diets don't work. Healthy eating habits do. Yes, sir.
Dr. Wilson, say for example, 150 minutes a week of moderate activity. Are there any guidelines for, say, 60 plus days?
There are. He asks, are there guidelines for seniors as opposed to the general public at large? And I'm going to talk about 10,000 steps. We've all heard that recently as a simple public health goal. I'm going to address that and what you need to do at different ages for the health benefits, okay? So I'll come to that later. Excellent question. Sadly, though, only about 16 to 20% of the Canadians meet these guidelines, and it tends to decline with age. Unfortunately, we've become a very sedentary society.
So all 16% are in this room, right?
Yeah, actually, the people that are in this room are probably the ones that are already doing some of these. And I find it ironic that the people that are out there walking 300 minutes a week are the ones that probably don't need to. The people that need to be walking the 150 are the ones at home playing with their iPad or watching Netflix or, I'm not a cynic, but I am a bit of a realist. And this is the physician in me talking. Excuses, I've heard them all. I don't like it. I'm not a walker. Okay, what else are you going to do? I'm too tired. Too busy, no time. You'll have lots of time to rest when you're dead. No one to walk with. Inclement weather. And I must admit, we have some nasty weather here. But, somebody has said there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate gear. But I have pretty good gear, and I can tell you, doing some of my walks, we've had some pretty miserable weather, and with good Gore-Tex gear, I've been drenched to the bone. If you're out in a heavy rain all day long, good gear doesn't help. I live in the country. There's no sidewalks. There's bears out there. I don't like farm dogs. The mosquitoes are awful in Muskoka, and I grant you, end of May and June, mosquitoes are nasty if you're out in the country. I wouldn't do a walk in Algonquin in June. Logging trucks. Now, mind you, in cities, we've got urban sprawl. And so people sometimes now describe cities as to their walkability index. Like, I would not want to walk around Los Angeles or Chicago necessarily, although the waterfront along Lake Michigan is quite nice. San Francisco, Boston, Victoria, Vancouver, I could walk there a lot. Charlottetown, they're so kind in Prince Edward Island. Even if you're not at a crosswalk, not at a stoplight, you're in the middle of a friggin' highway, and you look as though you're going to walk across the road, they stop for you. Try that in Montreal and you'll get run over. Here's another thing, which is my rationale for not being an athlete. There's always a new fitness trend, but I think I'm trying to show you that walking has probably stood the test of time more so than these. If you think about it, I don't think my parents went to a gym. They weren't out running. I did learn to love walking from my mother and my aunt and uncle in England. I was born in the north of England, and my uncle in particular, my mom's brother, he loved walking, and he introduced me to the joys of walking in England, in the Cheviots and the Northumberland coast, and particularly Lake District National Park in the northwest of England. But we'll come to that later. These are all some trends that I just thought about in the last 50 years or so. And I don't do marathons or triathlons. I don't do cross fitness. You want to injure yourself, do cross fitness. High intensity interval training, there is some merit to that. Apparently when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, back in whenever it was, I can't remember, 1954 or something. He'd never run a mile in his life or tried to sprint a mile. His specialty was the 1,500 meter, I think, or even less than that, because that's almost a mile. And yet, he ran the mile. He broke the 4-minute mile for the very first time. But what he did was you have periods where you exercise at your usual pace, moderate pace, and then you go as hard as you can for like 20 or 30 seconds, and then back to your usual pace. And that seems to be better for you in terms of fitness than if you're walking at a steady pace, say 2.5 or 3 miles an hour. To every now and then crank it up to 4, pray that you're going to survive, and then drop it back to 3 or whatever you're comfortable with. That's called high-intensity interval training, and I know a lot of the Olympic athletes use that. We've got iPhones since 2007 and various wearable devices to track the number of steps that we use. I don't have a Fitbit or anything, but I can track the number of steps in a day on my smartphone if I so choose. I want to show you this article, and I'm hoping this is from the Ontario Medical Review, March 2016, and just ignore the graph on the bottom, and we can't. Oh, there it is. Can you see that little red dot? Okay. I want you to focus here, but ignore that for the time being. These are some traditional risk factors for ill health and premature death. And you've seen them before. Obesity, smoking, high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, diabetes. And the blues are men and the yellows are women. So for instance, you can see that high blood pressure, big risk factor in men. And they don't call high blood pressure the silent killer for nothing. Most people who have high blood pressure don't know they have it. And even if you had it and you treat it, it's often not very well controlled. But the granddaddy of them all, low cardiorespiratory fitness. And yet, these get all the attention because there's medications to treat them. Does that sound cynical? Big Pharma would like nothing better than you to take atorvastatin or Lipitor for the rest of your life, or rosuvastatin or Crestor. And I'm not saying those drugs aren't without merit, but I think you're starting to find physicians now prescribe exercise or walking as if it were a medication for your health. Doesn't cost much except 21, 22 minutes of your time each day, and there's virtually no side effects as long as you don't get run over. And I say that jokingly, but I read recently that there were 910 pedestrians killed in Canada since 2018 to 2020, run over by vehicles. And cars and trucks are getting bigger and bigger, and you can't even see a 10-year-old girl in front of your Cadillac Escalade or whatever they're called. That's pretty sad. So I say that jokingly, but you have to be very careful, even on crosswalks, that you don't get run over. Oops. And again, oddly enough, the very next month in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, prescribing exercise interventions, not just for heart disease, but for patients with chronic conditions. And I know that physicians in Scotland and Ireland prescribe walking for their patients. And some of the towns and cities there have walking routes designated for them. And it's not just, this is for chronic conditions like arthritis, diabetes, cancer, Parkinson's disease. Now we're going to come back to your question, Sarah, about what's with the 10,000 steps, because this has been popularized recently as a public health goal. Interestingly, it started out as a marketing ploy back in the 1960s by a Japanese clock company who were marketing a pedometer And I don't speak Japanese, but apparently the Japanese character for 10,000 looks similar to a person walking. So they thought, let's try this, 10,000 steps a day. Is that realistic? Is it achievable? Well, I can tell you at my height, 5'6", 1.68 meters, 135 pounds, 62 kilograms, takes me about an hour and a half to clock 10,000 steps. That's about 90 minutes, and I got to walk about 5 miles or 8 kilometers to do that. So yeah, you can do it, but who's got that time? I do now, because I'm mostly retired. But when I was working, no, I'd be lucky to get in 20 minutes a day until I was on holidays. What's the evidence behind this? Well, in general, there's an inverse relationship between your increased activity or energy expenditure, however you do it, and improvements to your health. Okay? So it's an inverse relationship between events and how much you. So the more you walk, the less likely you are to suffer a health problem, okay? The more you walk or the more you exercise, the better for your health. A 2015 study showed that, if you do 10,000 steps a day, you'll reduce your mortality within the confines of that study period by almost a half. That sounds pretty good, but you got to put in the time. I would argue that the most important goal is to get 2,000, 2,500 steps in a day. Get people off the couch and off their chairs and off their iPad and off Netflix and outside or walking or the equivalent for 21 or 22 minutes a day. That's the most important bang for your buck. Now, you asked about older folks. Well, I've said people over 60, the maximum benefit, probably the health benefits, probably kicks in at about 4,000 to 6,000 steps. If you're young, the maximum benefit is about 8,000 steps. Now, that doesn't mean that 12,000 isn't good for you. It just means that the increased benefits to your health is incremental, like it's small compared to that first 2,500 or 4,000. Okay? But I can show you papers, and I won't tonight, but there are studies in people well into their 80s that show that if you can walk the length of the corridor in your retirement home or walk 400 meters in a day, that's 2 laps around the Summit Center, you'll be better off for it. In fact, if you can't walk 400 meters in your 80s, you're probably not going to be alive 6 years from now. So, sounds too good to be true.
Should you do 10,000 steps every day?
No, that's the suggested goal, but that I think is unrealistic. I think the most important is to get in 2,500 steps. Okay, and that takes, if you look at my wife and I, we walk around the block usually in the evening. It's about exactly 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers. We walk about 3 miles an hour. Takes us about 20 minutes. There you go. And my smartphone would say I've done about 2,400 steps. Now, I'm obsessive enough that I usually spend 30 minutes on my treadmill, too. So there's another 2,500. Anyway, and there's lots of studies to show this is true now. This is one of the most recent ones from the Journal of American Medical Association. Oddly enough, published in America, but the trial was conducted in England. It's one of the larger studies I came across. 78,000 people between the ages of 40 and 80. And they were able to show that, again, that for every 2,000 steps you do, there's health benefits, not just for heart disease, not for stroke, but for most chronic conditions that affect our society. You want even more good news? British Medical Journal, 2013. This was what's called a meta-analysis, where they looked at several studies, where the authors of the study had the audacity to compare walking and exercise to the effects of medications prescribed for the same medication, for the same condition. There was only one condition where medications were superior to walking, and that was for heart failure. Diuretics were superior to walking or exercise. Everything else, walking was about the same. Incredible, but true. I should be in Ripley's, believe it or not. Enough about the health benefits of walking. I'm a committed walker, but I like walking for enjoyment as well. And I think, we're blessed living in Muskoka because we got all sorts of places to walk. And I think I'll say it again, walking in nature is better than walking around asphalt. So I think, admittedly, most of these places you have to drive a bit to get to, but once you're there, the walking is lovely. And we're so fortunate to have, I only got 3 buttons here, but it's hard deciding which one to press. We're very fortunate in having Arrowhead just like 10 minutes away, Limberlost Forest Reserve about 20 minutes away, and of course the 2 most popular provincial parks in all of Ontario, Algonquin and Killbear. Lovely hiking trails in all of these places. And Hardy Lake Provincial Park is a little bit closer. And there's others, Restoule. So we're very lucky to have all of this. And even in town, we have Hunters Bay Trail and Fairy Vista. We're very fortunate. Here's a picture from an elevation point in Booth's Rock Trail in Algonquin Park. Outdoor Canada rates it as one of the 10 best hikes in the country. That's impressive, and it's 40 minutes away. It's a nice walk. It's about 4.5 kilometers. There's about 120 meters elevation, maybe 300 or 400 feet. Takes you about an hour and a half. Lovely views in the fall. Not to be outdone by winter, there's a few of us snowshoeing around Solitaire Lake at the Limberlost Forest Reserve, and I see one member in the audience who's in that photograph. One of my favorite places to walk is in the Lake District National Park in the northwest of England. As I was telling Paula, I was born in Newcastle in the northeast of England and came to Canada at 5 years of age. But my uncle there in Tynemouth, just beside Newcastle, very instrumental in introducing me to the joys of walking in England. There's a picture of my wife and I and my wife's sister Lynn at the top of Old Man Coniston, one of the classic hikes in the Lake District. This is about a 11-mile, 17-kilometer hike up a 2,600 foot mountain, about 800 meters. Really fun, beautiful views. And I saw women that were in their 3rd trimester pregnancy hiking up this hill. And I met an old guy at the top who had to be in his early 80s. And he was saying, what a wonderful view, what a gorgeous day. And I said, do you do this often? And he said, well, I was up Skiddaw a couple of days ago. That's another 3,000 foot mountain in the Lake District. So if you're a walker, you're a walker. My wife and I have done a few long-distance trails in England as well, and these are a few. We've done numerous day hikes in the Lake District, but these were mostly on our own, although you can book these with the internet now pretty easily, although we often hire a company based out of Keswick, a small village in the Lake District, who will organize your accommodations for you en route, and they can arrange for a sort of a Sherpa van or pack horse service that takes your gear and from one bed and breakfast to the next, or from there to the next pub, and where you're going to stay, and makes it easy. So you just carry, you've got a 30-liter day pack that's got a rain gear, a sweater, your lunch, and your camera, and, your sunglasses in case the sun shines, this sort of thing. So the first one we did was Hadrian's Wall Path, which, again, my eyesight must be going, because I can't see that. There's my family, my relatives were in time out there. Most people do this from east to west. I'm a bit of a contrarian. So the reason I did it from west to east. Why? Because the rains are coming in from the west. I'd rather have it at my back instead of my front. And now you're starting to see guidebooks doing the west to east route. When we did the coast-to-coast path a couple of years later, this is about a 200-mile, 300-kilometer walk. My wife and I did it in about 16 days. It's lovely. Where's that red dot? I should wear my glasses more often. I do put them on to drive. You walk through the Lake District National Park, which is this section over here. Then you also walk through the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and then finally the North York Moors National Park. 16 days, average about 12 miles a day, which is, somebody do the math for me, probably 17 or 18 kilometers. And there's a fair bit of elevation going through, so it can be challenging some days, but honestly, we had pretty good weather. 2 days were miserable. And I know Mary, Spring, she did the first half with us. I forget where you got off, Richmond or someplace. And so if you want to get an honest appraisal of the walk, talk to Mary. But I enjoyed it. But it's the sort of holiday where you need to book a few days rest when you get home to recover. And there's the sort of terrain. That's, again, my principal walking buddy of about 50 years, Louise. Shows you the typical terrain you're hiking on. And there's me smiling because we're going downhill at this point. And lovely scenery. And yeah. You meet interesting people. We met people from Texas, from Japan, from the Netherlands, a lot of British people doing it. This was a couple that we met from Seattle, Washington. And you look at them. They're slim, they're smiling, so they're crazy just like me. And here's a young lad from Australia, smiling, just out in the world, discovering them, hiking the coast to coast on his own, just for, figuring what life's all about. And a few years ago, my wife and I did something different. We decided to try a guided group walk in Madeira, one of the Portuguese islands in the North Atlantic off the coast of Morocco. And this was good. We went with a group called Teachers Travel, which is similar to Walker's World now, because it's not just teachers. And in Britain, people that were in this group had booked it through HF Holidays, a British company. Here you walk with a group with a guide, hopefully you don't get lost. But it's different because they arrange the flights, the transport from the airport to the hotel that you're staying at. And you're there for 11 days at this hotel. Your breakfast and your dinner's provided. And then a bus takes you to where you're going to walk during the day. And there are two groups. There's a more rigorous hike with more elevation, and there's a lesser hike with less elevation that is somewhat easier. But, you're still talking like 8 or 10 kilometers on the easy walks, but there might only be 100 or 200 meter elevation compared to maybe 400 or 600 feet elevation. Even the more rigorous walks weren't that rigorous, but still quite enjoyable. And it's nice just having your suitcase in the same room for an 11-day period and then pack up and go home. We do have trails in Canada. They're long-distance trails. I've not done any of them. I've done sections of some of them, but it's not the same as in Britain and Europe, where they're as organized as they are, where a company can book your accommodation, book your van service to take you from one place to the next. My wife and I tried walking in Prince Edward Island, the so-called Island Walk, where they're trying to develop it like some of the walks in Britain, where you can, they have the Confederation Trail, which is a bicycle trail along the center of Prince Edward Island, but you're often in the woods or fields. You're not, Prince Edward Island, people like the ocean. So we tried to walk sections of the ocean on this island walk, and it was enjoyable, but we were camping. We had to arrive at the spot, walk halfway, walk back. If you want to do the whole thing, you almost have to have a chauffeur to drop you off, walk, pick you up at the end of the day, take you to a restaurant to get something to eat, take you to your motel or bed and breakfast for the night, pick you up the following morning, take you back to where you left, and carry on. And most of us don't have chauffeurs like that or friends that are willing to do that. Here's a picture of me again smiling. I'm pretty sure that was on the Hadrian's Wall path, but that's to remind me. You can see my caps blinking. Reminds me of one of the funniest quotes I saw in reading on walking from Ellen DeGeneres, the talk host or whatever. And she's quoted as saying, "My grandmother started walking 5 miles a day when she was 60. She's 93 now, and we don't know where the hell she is." So anyway, I would like to thank you for your attention. And this was a statement that was in that In Praise of Walking book by Shane O'Mara. Thought it was very good. Don't stop walking because you're getting older. You get old when you stop walking. And there you have it.